Okay, time to continue our NRL records series. We're now looking at the Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. There are some very interesting stats with this club. The only record I couldn't find was the highest attendance. However, a record I did find that I didn't find for the Canberra Raiders or the Brisbane Broncos is the most field goals scored by a player at a club, which is an interesting record. So, don't have the highest attendance, but do have the most field goals. So, not every video is going to go to exactly the same template. I'm trying to keep them as similar as possible. But looking at this, going forward, I may tweak how I do the rest of the NRL clubs. But anyway, let's dive in to the Bulldogs' records. Let's have a look at their team records. So their biggest win, for example, is a 66 points to 4 win against the North Queensland Cowboys on the 27th of August 1995. The Bulldogs had a very, very good season that season. The Cowboys didn't. But 60 years prior, or just over 60 years prior, was the team's biggest loss, which is an 87 points to 7 defeat to the Sydney Roosters on the 18th of May 1935. And this is just over 90 years ago. And the club before the Second World War wasn't very good. Their early seasons, they are terrible. And it's interesting that 60 years apart, or just thereabouts, is their biggest win and their biggest defeat. As I say, couldn't find the highest attendance, so let's dive on to the longest winning streak, which is 17 matches between the 31st of March and the 3rd of August 2002. They were a pretty good side back in the early 2000s, let's not kid ourselves. Longest losing streak stands at 11 matches, and they've done that twice. Firstly, in between 55 and 56, the 25th of June. That is weird. That is nearly 70 years ago, as I'm recording this video. They start one of their longest losing streaks to the 14th of April 56, and then the 6th of July 65 to the 17th of April 66. So 10 years apart, they have their two longest losing streaks back in the mid-50s and the mid-60s. Now let's dive into the individual records, which are dominated by one particular player. And if you're a Bulldogs fan, you know who Hasim El Masri is. And there'll be some younger NRL fans or new rugby league fans who won't know how good Hasim El Masri is, or was. He's still alive, but he's just his records. One of the top point scorers of all time in Australian rugby league. He has the most games for a Bulldogs player at 317 between 1996 and 2009. He scores the most tries for a Bulldogs player at 159 in that same time frame. And he scores the most points for the Bulldogs with 2,418. He also has the most kicks at goal in a match at 11 versus South Sydney on the 3rd of August 2003. So those are the individual records Hasim El Masri holds for the Canterbury Bulldogs. One of the top point scorers of all time. I think he's still in the top 4 for point scoring in NRL history. When it comes to appearances, he's part of the 300 club. I mean, that club is getting bigger each season, but he was one of the first players to crack 300 appearances in the NRL. One of the first. Not the first, but one of the first to get to that milestone. The tries record, I mean, look, he's the top Bulldogs try scorer. He's still, I think, in the top 10 with 159. That is pretty good. And the fact that he's still that high up in the tries scored all time is amazing. But here's something else. The most field goals scored for the club is held by Terry Lamb at 37 between 1984 and 1996. Hasim El Masri isn't even close when it comes to field goals. So Terry Lamb holds that individual record, and not just holds it, he holds it by some significant margin over Trent Hodgkinson. Yeah, there's a significant... I think he has 22 more field goals than Trent Hodgkinson. So let's put that into perspective. And Hodgkinson was a pretty good halfback, but Terry Lamb, 37 field goals as a Bulldogs player. The most tries in a match stands at 5. Edgar Newman versus the Balmain Tigers on the 15th of August 1942 at the beginning of World War II. And Nigel Vanganar, he scored 5 against Souths on the 19th of April 2002. And he actually counted off his tries. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Obviously, Bostock last weekend did the 1, 2, 3, 4 when he scored his 4th. But here's another individual record that Hasim El Masri holds, and that's the most points in a season by a Bulldogs player at 342 in the 2004 season. Really interesting club to look at. Hasim El Masri, I have to look at his career, if we're being honest. Do a video on his career, because he holds quite a few records for the Bulldogs. And you have to look at where he stands all time in the various points, appearances, tries, points in a season records. Because he's in the top 10 in almost every category that he holds a record for the Bulldogs all time, which is ridiculous. So there we go. There's a brief look at the NRL records of the Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. Thank you very much for watching. If you are a Bulldogs fan, or if you're an NRL fan in general, place your thoughts in the comments section below. And I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.